So, Richy, you want to join the floor again?
Yeah, sure. No worries. I'm here.
Excellent. So, the way we're going to run this session, I'm going to interview Richy. So, what's really great and how this works so well is because over the last few years, the ANZ Yammer network has been identified as one of the top performers globally for large size organizations. I think it's been 3 consecutive years that you've been identified as a top performer. So, who better to jump in and give some of these really great stories and insights? And I know, especially on for some of the great case studies that we've been able to write with ANZ, there's always some really exciting stories around campaigns that you're running on your network. So I wanted to have a little bit of a conversation about campaigns on the ANZ Yammer network. And I think we titled this session The Anatomy of a Successful Campaign. So for this particular session, I'm sure there'll be lots of fantastic takeaways. I know that Richy's going to share some sort of screenshots to give you a bit of an insight of how it all works for ANZ's network. So Richy, let's kick off the conversation. Like maybe
Sure.
we start from the top. How do you approach Yammer campaigns at ANZ? How does it all start? How does it all kick off?
Sure. So I guess just to give you a little bit of background about where I kind of sit and where our team sits, we're in the corporate communications team at ANZ, and we kind of manage the Yammer platform, and we have our technology partners as well. But being in corporate communications, a lot of our kind of broader team are working on campaigns that go on around the bank. So that's kind of our first foot in the door. A lot of people know they can come to us and ask us tips and tricks on a campaign and get our thoughts on what they could potentially do. But more broadly, I think we also have, being such a large organisation where we've got over 50,000 people, there's a lot of people in the business that want to run campaigns as well. And again, they'll generally come to us and say, hey, I've got an idea, or we're launching something, or we've got a new product, or we want to run a competition. What can we do? Is it right for Yammer? Or maybe there's some other questions we'll ask, but we want to be on Yammer. What can we do? So from there, we generally have our initial conversation, I'd guess, and it's really all about purpose. So what are you trying to achieve, and is it right for Yammer? And I think the is it right for Yammer is a really important conversation, because Yammer is all about discussion and rich communication and conversations with people. You really shouldn't be aiming to talk to people. You should be chatting with people, and you want people to have a chat or understand what you're trying to get out there, and just get involved and reply. So we try and make sure that the campaigns that are running on Yammer have a conversation component. Is there a question that you can ask, or is this something you're asking people to do? Again, maybe there are quite a few competitions happening on the network at the moment. So what's the easy thing that you can try and get people to do? But are you trying to create awareness about a new product or service? Are you looking at, again, to share knowledge? How significant is the change? Who is the audience? Where does it belong? It's a lot of kind of questioning and answering and figuring out, again, does this belong on Yammer? Is Yammer the right thing? And then how is it kind of integrated, and where can we go from there? And once we've had that initial conversation, people usually go away and figure out a lot of those things. So they might come back and say, yes, we still want to go ahead on Yammer, or no, maybe it's just right that we do an awareness campaign through the internet and through, not internet, intranet, and through email, and some other types of ways, but maybe it doesn't need to have a conversation component. But they'll go away, develop a content plan, but we'll generally follow up as well and say, okay, here's what we discussed, here's what best practice looks like, here's a few suggestions, and kind of go from there.
And I think that's great that your team is there to support, your broader staff base for the ones that do want to embrace and potentially use Yammer for these campaigns. And I think it's also kind of goes back to the point where for people who are just getting started, or they think they want their campaign to go on Yammer, it could be quite a daunting thing to go live with it with some messaging or a campaign. So for your team, you're sort of there, not necessarily to handhold, but to give them that starting point, even going back to those simple things about purpose, like what are you wanting to communicate? I think kind of stripping it back to those basics is really important, and it's great to hear. But for this, you have a campaign running on your network currently, and I believe it's called Dial Up the Fun.
Yes.
I'm hoping we can deep dive into this one a little bit more. So how did this one all start?
Sure. So This is really based on, I think, just how people are feeling at the moment. So again, like our head office is in Melbourne, and as everyone kind of knows, even all around the world, there's a bit of COVID fatigue. Like people have been working at home for a really long time, and just the anecdotal feedback that was people felt a little bit burnt out and a little bit tired. And I think we have a really great culture at ANZ where, like, when we're in the office, we want to talk to people, we want to enjoy one another, and we want to kind of have a more lighthearted time sometimes. Like, it's okay to have a bit of fun at work, and that's something that's really important to ANZ. So it was actually our graduate team that were tasked with, okay, what can you do to kind of uplift people and have a little bit of fun? And yeah, how can you kind of introduce that? And they came up with the idea of a series of competitions to happen on the network. So I'm actually going to share my screen so you can see a few of the screenshots of the Dial Up the Fun campaign. But yeah, essentially they've organised, and it's still ongoing, it hasn't finished yet, but they've organised a series of competitions that happen every 1 to 2 weeks to really get people involved and chatting with one another and re-establishing the social connection that maybe they haven't had as much working from home. And again, I know we have team meetings, we talk with our direct teams, but the kind of incidental conversations you have in the tea room, they're probably the ones that people have missed out on in such a long time. And this is just one opportunity to bring people together. So, for example, the first one from Josh was the one that kicked off, and that was the scavenger hunt, where you'd upload 3 photos. So something cute, something you can't live without, and something funny or that makes you smile. And I'll share a few examples on the next slide in a minute. But there was that. There was then about the artist, which was amazing to see how many creative people we kind of have at ANZ, and everyone has outside hobbies in their personal lives, but to see the artistic things that people were sharing, whether it be quilting or I don't know, like paintings and drawing, and I don't know, it was kind of amazing. And then the Banker Bake Off, and everyone loves baking and food and cakes and bread and everything. So there was just so much amazing food that was uploaded, and it wasn't great for my waistline. I ordered a lot more Uber Eats that week. But here's a few of the replies. And again, it's just a little bit of lighthearted fun. So again, the first one is a dog, a record player, and a bacon costume. Very, very nice. A speed typing competition, which is actually another one that's running this week, is who's the best speed typer in ANZ and how many errors do you make? There's the quilting, again, like amazing things that people have made. And then this amazing baking artist that made a city, like I think it was Sydney, and a castle and a Christmas village. Like it's been really incredible, and it has again just brought a bit of fun to the network. Like we have certain spaces set up for that already. Like we have the pets group, we have the foodies community where people can talk about this, but this is encouraging people that are maybe not active in that social way on Yammer to actually jump in. And I think it's really important as well. It really brings people on, and they can actually learn about something incidentally as well. Like that is a big reason we use Yammer, is it actually helps people get their jobs done. And for those people that maybe haven't found a reason to jump on Yammer before, this is their window in to jump on, and then hopefully they'll get some recommended content in the home feed and discovery feed. So that's kind of the campaign. I mean, it's been very successful.
This is awesome stuff. And when I think about the value of that cross-enterprise collaboration and being able to sort of bump into somebody that you wouldn't necessarily maybe even bump into in the office, and you can learn all of these great things about them. It's those sort of very initial base level connections that can lead to, those conversations that bring you more of that business value. And who didn't bake a loaf of bread throughout the pandemic, right? Like I'm sure there were lots of examples of that within your Dial Up the Fun campaign. And in terms of amplifying this, and it's still happening, on the network right now. This is a live, real-time campaign. What are some other ways that this was amplified? Did you have any other leaders, or were you able to identify some influencers to keep this conversation going? How did all that work?
Sure. So yeah, I think normally for most campaigns, and again, we use SWOOP heavily to identify influencers for our campaigns. Like it's usually one of the going in talking points is, it is influencers, you should use them. Are there already people talking about your topic? How can you engage them? So that's always a talking point. But for this campaign, it was a little bit different because this community that it's running in is a new community. So there wasn't anyone particularly engaged in there. So we actually said, okay, why don't we use a couple of the leaders? And the reason for that is we want people to know that there is permission from the top down that you can participate in something like this. So I think it was our CEO Shane Elliott who did the first post a couple of weeks prior to let everyone know that this was coming up, and then we had our head of T&C jump in, and they've also been encouraged to participate as well. So we did kind of use leaders in that way, but then we also looked at influencers in those other communities. So the foodies group, we recommended that maybe the influencers from that community jump in, or the pets community for the first scavenger hunt, I think it was shared in there, or about the artist, we went to the photography group. So we didn't, I guess, traditionally look at influencers by topic, but we did go community by community and find if there was a relevant place to get them from, to then bring them to the Dial Up the Fun community.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you identify your community-based influencers that would line up with whatever topic you're wanting to go out with for a campaign.
Yes, okay. That's right.
I love that idea.
Yeah, and I think we try and be quite careful with that as well, because I think naturally when people set up a campaign, they're like, okay, I need to get the word out, and they might want to share it to 20 communities. And we're very careful to say, if we do recommend other communities, don't just spam other people. If you're sharing your competition or your campaign into the community, make sure it aligns with the purpose, because every community has a purpose. There's something they're trying to achieve. And if you just randomly jump in there, it's not going to make sense. So make sure you've spoken, maybe given the group admin a heads up, let them know that this is going to happen, and just make sure when you're sharing that it aligns to their purpose and mentions the topic as well.
And I can see in the chat we do have a few questions coming through for you as well. Great. So we'll have a chance to have a more in-depth discussion with Richy in our discussion room. We'll share that link just a little bit later, but we'll continue the conversation here for now. Richy, do you have any sort of top tips? What are the do's and don'ts for campaigns on ANZ's Yammer network?
Sure. Yeah, I think I might have mentioned a few of them in the beginning, but I think number one, making it conversational. Like Yammer, again, because so many people are there, people naturally just want to jump into Yammer to share what they're working on. But if it's not in the right place and it's not going to start a conversation, it might live on the feed for a couple of hours, and then the conversations are going to overtake, because that's what people are coming to Yammer to do. So make sure there is a conversational component or a question that people can answer or something they can do. Keep it simple. So the ask should be fairly simple. Maybe it's uploading a photo using a hashtag. We don't see too many of the 25 words or less competitions, because again, they're okay, but they do take quite a bit of time to participate in, and they're not that, they're okay. But again, it's a little bit too much of an ask. I think if you can give a one-word answer or a photo or something actually you're passionate about, there's that, a clear call to action. Using the influencers and the relationships they have established on the network is always a key success, because I have relationships with people on Yammer, and if I post, they're more likely to like my post because they know me. So you just try and explain that even if you are, I don't know, the campaign team, maybe in the first couple of days, you might be trying to amp up and get information out there, but make sure you have influencers either lined up to do the first reply, so people can see a reply and they say, okay, great, I can pay permission to jump in, or again, maybe people they know will jump in. Don't just rely on Yammer. So a lot of our Yammer campaigns are across our intranet, they're EDMs, they're in newsletters, they're in announcements, and don't kind of look at Yammer as just the be all and end all. You have to get people into Yammer to participate. So one thing we do very often is we have feature news items on our homepage intranet. So we will just link the Yammer post on that rather than writing a separate article, just link people straight to it to get people into Yammer to participate. Keep data in mind, and this is I should have mentioned it before. Think about what you want to achieve up front. So what is the goal? Is it creating social connection amongst people in different regions? Is something that we love to kind of recommend people aim for at ANZ, because we're spread across 33, 34 markets or something like that. So increase that. How much activity do you want to generate? Do you want to do a survey with the people you're, I guess, marketing to before and after to see, has the information actually been embedded? Is there something else you can do? So keep in mind what you're trying to achieve and make sure it's measurable. I think the data is really important, and then have a bit of fun. So they're the do's. I think the don'ts I'll quickly run over. Don't spam people. So again, don't spam people. You shouldn't have one person sharing everything because it should be multiple people with different relationships. Don't only talk to the campaign team. So make sure that you are liking people that actually the people that get involved in the replies. Make sure you like their replies and don't just talk to one another. Try and steer clear of running campaigns that overlap too many other things. I think if they're in completely different spheres, maybe we have one in the Philippines and one in, I don't know, Sydney, for example, that's fine because they're different locations. They're probably unlikely to overlap, but for the big global stuff, try and get an idea what's going on around the organisation, and then stray too far from the objective in the name of fun, because again, fun is great, but if people don't understand the connection between your campaign and what they're actually doing, and maybe that's because of an unclear hashtag or it's not embedded in each of the messages, it's a great activity, but it may not equal what you want it to. So they're kind of my major do's and don'ts.
A great pool of tips and tricks there, and really easy actionable things that you can apply for anyone who's dialed in for your next campaign that you're running on Yammer. And as a part of that, of course, you mentioned measuring success and having goals and figuring out if it lines up with what your original intentions and your original purpose was. For your Dial Up the Fun campaign, what did success look like for this? Like, how did this actually come to life for this campaign?
Sure. So again, it is kind of ongoing, but their goal was to really increase social connection, like I think I just mentioned, across our global community. So they wanted people to participate from Bengaluru, from Manila, from New Zealand, from Australia, and they're our kind of 4 biggest hubs internationally. And they've achieved that. Like, they are the 4 biggest interactors and they almost have the same amount of activity. And I might actually, I'll share my screen again because I did grab a few stats on their campaign, but that was kind of one of their big achievements. They also wanted, I think, kind of 20 entries for each competition, which they far exceeded. You can see About the Artist had 58, Scavenger Hunt had 86, Banker Bake Off had 53, and then a lot of replies and a lot of reactions and people getting involved. So for them, that's been a real success. But we'll also try and look at like persona distribution, because a persona, having a high number of broadcasters in a campaign probably means that it's more the campaign team talking to one another, which is, again, probably not what you want. So again, I'm just going to flick over to a slide we actually present in what we call our SWOOP masterclasses, but we'll talk about persona distribution, user activity, the response rate, and have a look at the most engaging posts. So we give people ideas on things that they can track, but it is down to the individual campaign on what they're wanting to achieve. Is it increasing activity in their community? Then you'd look at interactive members, or again, if I jump back to the next slide, sorry for jumping around, but the hot topics, these are our 4 top hashtags and topics on the network from the enterprise tab. So we're trying to get up there and actually overtake the network, not overtake the network, that's the wrong way to put it, but we're really trying to kind of be up there amongst the hottest topics at ANZ, and they are. So it's really down to every campaign. Again, some people might look for other metrics that maybe aren't on SWOOP, and they'll do a survey before and after of people, which is completely fine, but we do try and tailor it depending on the campaign and what data they can actually get.
And we're about 1 minute from heading off into the discussion room. But before we do, for the Dial Up the Fun campaign, Richy, was there any broader impact across the network? What did this lead to?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've had a huge increase in activity since they started this campaign. And again, I haven't looked into it enough to say, okay, this was definitely the reason that we saw the increase, but I'm 99% sure it is. So like, we've had messages increased by 9%, reactions increased by 21%, shares increased by 10%, at mentions 18%, files uploaded by 30%, hashtags and topics up by 105%. And then just on people absorbing and jumping into Yammer, we've had the number of users consuming content increased by 49% day on day, like compared to the previous month. So a huge, absolutely huge increase in activity. And again, we're trying to keep people there now. I know it's coming up to Christmas, so that's going to be particularly difficult, but it's just been overwhelmingly positive. And yeah, they've just done an absolutely fabulous job. And it really does show when it's global, inclusive, easy to jump into, that it can really have a lasting and positive impact. And I hope we kind of see that as people come away and then come back in the new year.
Incredible. It's incredible stuff. Those results, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better. So it must have been,
Yeah.
it's must been a huge success. And of course, you'll see how that all looks over the coming weeks as well. Now, if for anyone wanting to tap into more of Richy's insights and experience from ANZ's Yammer network, please join us over in the discussion room. If you have a look in the chat right now, you'll see a link. You just click on that link, you'll be put on hold from this meeting, and we can meet Richy for about 10 minutes of discussion over in the discussion room. And thanks so much again, Richy, for joining us, and congratulations.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Emily. That was great.
Thank you. We'll see you all back here in about 10 minutes.